Hey, welcome back to the SNS College Football Podcast. Tonight, it's myself and then Tolman, aka Dave from Houston. This is going to be our national championship preview. And before we get into the actual game breakdown, we have a lot of other topics that we're going to cover. Should be some fun ones, a fun night. We're going to talk about some coaching changes, uh, new little segment that we're trying out called Half Baked Ideas, some kind of crazy stuff that Crazy Dave from Houston has come up with. But quick note, you guys, for most of this year, were used to seeing Addison on the pod. He is now deceased from sports, that is. He's a New England Patriots fan, and my team ruined their season by knocking them out of the bye week that they were going to get in the home game. So then they decided to lose at home to the Titans, and they shit the bed. And then obviously us three are Ohio State fans, so he is, quote, done with football for 2019, unquote. So, Dave, why don't you go ahead and take it away, man?
Yeah, it is true that our teams, Ohio State football and basketball, has not won this decade,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we are not quite done with the 2019 season. We got some fun things to talk about. We're going to start the show off with a new segment, just kind of like our opening argument. So if we have something that we want to vent about, if we have like a hot take, bold prediction, any of those types of things.
Sure.
This will be like a good thing, in the off season. It'll, keep us up to date with some of the current events in college football. So after about a month of speculation, we can confirm that Jack Cohn is alive. It's important that we point that out. He played in the Rose Bowl. He didn't play very well. He had a good season, but I've got a bold prediction that I think Graham Mertz will end up being the starter for Wisconsin at some point next season. History there, he is by far the most talented quarterback they've ever had on the roster. When Paul Chryst took the job, he actually showed that he would supplant a incumbent quarterback. There was that weird year where like they had Stave, Hornibrook's freshman year, Bart Houston, and he ended up going with the freshman. So Graham Mertz says Wisconsin's starting quarterback at some point next year.
Yeah. Quick note on that. I think before this year started, we thought that there was a really good chance that he would win that job, and then we were a little surprised that Cohen got the nod. And as you said, I think Cohen had his moments. I felt like he played pretty big against Minnesota, but and he had some good moments against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. But I think that for Wisconsin, we've seen a glimpse of what they can be when they do have really talented quarterback under center when they had Russ Wilson. And I know that's a little different. They don't they got him as a transfer. That's not a guy they usually I think target or get. But Mertz is by far and away the most talented quarterback prospect that they've had in there, and that's certainly going to be interesting next year to see what happens with that because I think everyone assumes that Cohen will just be the starter again, but if Wisconsin wants to take the next step, maybe Mertz gets a real shot. Spring ball, and then fall we might, hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I have a hot take. So we got the news today that Jake Fromm, is leaving early for the draft, and that was a bit of a surprise to me. And I was struggling to find who was going to take over for him at quarterback for Georgia. And I was just thinking about this. It seems to me that Georgia's trajectory right now under Kirby Smart is like LSU under Les Miles. They have fantastic recruiting classes, but being conservative on offense and now some question marks at quarterback going forward, even though they have all these talented skill position players around them, I just don't see Georgia under Kirby Smart I don't see them getting over the hump and beating more elite teams kind of in the same way that LSU was with Les Miles.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We've talked about that. I think Georgia in the national title game against Alabama, that seemed to be their peak. That seemed to be their moment that they could possibly pull it off. And Kirby's been bringing in, elite recruiting classes, like you said, T. But we've covered this on the pod this year extensively. Their offensive coaching staff is really bad, and it's one of the worst ones we've seen as far as game planning, in-game adjustments, just creativity overall. The offense is really stale. And I know they had some young receivers, but they had some guys that definitely showed some talent towards the end of the year, like Pickens. Cager was hurt, but when he was in, he looked pretty good. And Georgia still couldn't really get much going. And we've said before that we feel like we were going to give Fromm, we kept giving him a pass. But I feel like he did regress. I don't like how he threw the deep ball this year, just like last year. His freshman year seemed to be his best year, I thought. But I totally agree. This is a program that if you're a Georgia fan, when Kirby first got there in that season when they went to the national title game, there was a ton of excitement. They felt like they were finally getting over the hump, which they couldn't do with Mark Richt. But now it definitely feels like this program's trending downwards a little bit, and that's not good for them because Florida and Dan Mullen seem to be on their way up. And this might seem like kind of a joke, but Tennessee did have a little bit of a better finish to the year. They have a pretty good recruiting class coming in. It's not going to get any easier in the East, is what I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are themes that as we start to get into the off-season podcasts, which we're definitely going to bring you guys, these are themes that we're going to be talking about. Georgia, looking at their recruiting, they're going to have, by my count, 9 4- and 5-star receivers in the freshman and sophomore classes on the roster next year.
Yeah,
and I am concerned that they're going to be wasting some serious talent.
Yeah, valid concern because they did this year.
So thanks for chiming in on my opening. Nick, do you have any opening arguments that you want to
make? I have a little bit of a rant. Not so much of an argument, but I had something else I was going to talk about, but I've seen on Twitter, and this has been like a thing that's been going on for a few years now, and Tolman, honestly, like this year, you've been on every episode of the pod this year. In the last few years we've done this, you've definitely been on, some of the time. But I haven't had a rant of just rage like I feel like I might have here in a minute. I'm going to try to keep things pretty calm because we're having a good time and stuff.
I think I know where this is going. I was thinking this earlier this week, and this was going to be one of my losers, but go ahead.
So I don't. Maybe I tweeted about this earlier today. Yep. Buckeye fans for the longest time have been giving Kirk Herbstreit a really hard time about him being overly objective or trying his best to not be biased. And on obviously Twitter and like social media, it's not going to be the best place to look for this stuff because you're going to get people that definitely just troll. But there's a lot of hate towards a guy that's paid to objectively analyze college football. And, for you guys that are, I think for you guys that watch this pod on a regular basis right now, I think most of you guys know us or like know of us, like you know that we're Buckeye fans. So a lot of you guys might be Buckeye fans yourself. If you're not, whatever, no big deal. We welcome any and all fans. But for my own fan base, and I said this on Twitter today, and I don't have a problem saying this on air as well, but some of you guys need to shut the fuck up when it comes to Herbie being, this guy that, like I've said, is you guys need to understand that he is paid, again, to objectively analyze college football. I'm sorry that Ohio State can't be the best team every game, every year. I wish they were, but that's just not going to be the case. And so when this guy says something good about their opponent or says that he thinks somebody possibly could be the better team, you need to chill out. Just because the guy went to Ohio State, he doesn't need to just biasly root for them like the horrific Desmond Howard does on College Game Day for Michigan. And that's not me just hating on a Michigan guy, but I know people that are Michigan fans that will admit that Desmond is so openly biased that it makes it hard to really listen to his analysis when he's talking about anything Michigan related, or even like Ohio State related when Michigan's not involved. He just likes to pick the team against Ohio State. He just likes to hate on them. I think Herbie is still one of the best in the business as far as analyzing the game, calling games, and it's really sad to see him have to feel like he has to apologize to some idiots within the fan base that are claiming, Kirk, we disown you. We glad you moved to Tennessee. You're not a Buckeye. That's a bunch of horseshit. Like you guys
are not. It's not even like it's. He shouldn't have to apologize.
No.
What bothers me is that this Twitter war between Ohio State fans and Herbie is like causing Herbie to like snap a little bit. Like I see some snarky responses like, thanks Brad, have a great holiday too. It's like he's probably since we've been alive, I think he's the best college football like primetime analyst we've had. Like if you want him gone, like who do you want, like Dan Fouts or like fucking Bob Greasy back?
Right.
That's pathetic.
Right. Yeah, and I just think he does he does a great job, and I know people that know him personally, and they say he's as good of a guy as you think he would be. And unfortunately, when you get a mega college football fan base, it's going to be filled with idiots. And honestly, Ohio State has a lot of idiot fans. We just do. We have a lot of people that are good people, good fans, but we have some people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And this is one of those topics that I think that applies. So, that's, I guess, my short rant. I didn't get as angry as I thought I would, which is good. But I hope that our fans can kind of start to, I don't know, I guess open up to the fact that Kirk he just has a job to do, and he's definitely a Buckeye deep down. He roots for us every game. It's anybody that thinks any differently, they just don't know shit, basically. So that's the only thing I had for that, Tolman.
I think this is totally the platform for the rant, and sometimes we have things that are on our mind that are bothering us, and it's important to talk about them. So we'll be doing this probably every pod, definitely during the off season.
Yeah, I like it.
The next thing we're gonna do is this is a new segment that we're going to start rotating in with some of the conspiracy corners that we've been bringing you throughout the season. So this one's half-baked ideas. So we have this amazing group thread at SNS between Nick Addison, Steele, and Corey, where we just talk everything college football and, of course, other things, but I feel like we're always coming up with these really good ideas to make the game that we love better. So we're going to talk about them. We'd love to hear your guys' comments. If you guys have any ideas, like send them to us, and we'll be happy to talk about them like we always do with these things. So half-baked ideas tonight. One is a fun one. One is like I'm gonna sound like get off my lawn, and the other is a bonus one that I actually don't think is a half-baked idea. I actually think it should be true.
Okay.
So the fun one. So Nick, you go to weddings, right? And you have the photo booth with all of like the props in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, right?
Right.
So I think on any bowl game played up until like New Year's Eve, outside of the college football playoff falls before then, I think what they should do is they should have a touchdown or turnover celebration booth on the sidelines, that after you get like a scoop and score, like a big interception, that you can bring your teammates over there. They'll stock it with like fun props and stuff, and you just let them play for a minute. No penalty, just pure fun.
I like that. Yeah, bring a little more fun into the game. I feel like some of these programs already do that in the regular season, but yeah, I think that's a good idea for those bowl games. Yeah,
we saw some great ones during bowl season. We saw in the Boca Bowl they have a confetti station, a confetti turnover station that they could go to.
Yeah,
we saw in the Cheez-It Bowl they doused the coach with cheese balls.
Cheez-Its, yeah.
I thought that was really funny stuff, and if you want to try to add more intrigue into these bowl seasons, you can make it even more great by like this with the celebration booth.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay, so get off my lawn.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, if someone commits a personal foul against you, and you jump back up and you like flex in their face, then I think it should cancel it out. Also, if there's like a weak late hit out of bounds on the sidelines, and someone who's doesn't even have a helmet on, is not in the game, comes up and like starts talking shit to you and flexes, I think they should have to go into the game for their team and finish the drive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good.
It kept bothering me. Like a weak late hit out of bounds. Some like 160-pound walk on just like coming up to the person that got the flag on them. Like, you're not doing anything.
Yeah. I think you know where that it's not exactly the same thing, but where I feel like this could apply, and I think you would agree, is what about like something for a guy like Jalen Hurts who just isn't even watching his team finish the game? Like, he's just like doing this weird thing where he's like,
you can't go back in the game.
Yeah,
you're not watching your
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. Like we saw that twice this year, and we all agreed, like, what the hell is he doing? Like, is this you know what it is like I think I mentioned this on one of the pods before with him, that I've heard he's a really good guy, and like he seems like a good guy, but you have some of these guys that they try to like, I think it's one of those things where they try to create this perception of like how good of a guy they are, and it's almost like really fake. Like
fake. We like fake tough guys. You're talking about fake nice guys.
Yeah, like I'm gonna get some. I'm sure some of the people listening are giving me some hate for this, but like I kind of think LeBron does it a lot. Like I think it's like a passive aggressive thing, and like you're like trying too hard to be that guy. Like I don't know. I think there should be some kind of penalty for that. Like I don't know what it would be, but I thought that just popped up into my mind when we're talking about like guys on the sideline that just are not doing the thing they should be doing, basically.
It's like if you're being dramatic for just like the show of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So speaking of Jalen Hurts, this brings me to the last one, which I actually don't think is a half-baked idea, and I think we at SNS agree this is fact. If you're playing in the college football playoff and the game gets out of hand, that backups go in, you get a 3-year bowl ban.
Yeah, so this was something that was kind of like loosely thrown around as a joke.
I think it was unanimously agreed upon, though.
Yeah, but we definitely agreed that this has to be the case, and like we came up with I think there was like a couple other like side rules for like what would happen if you had these backups that played against you, or if you had backups in. But yeah, this is I mean, this would hopefully prevent the likings of like another LSU Oklahoma, for example, right?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect transition to we'll do winners and losers. We'll start with losers.
Perfect.
So Oklahoma is now under the 3-year bowl ban according to our new rule.
It's so funny to me. Like, yeah, they played poorly. That might have been my worst bet of bowl season. Thought there was value in them.
Yeah, we overthought that.
Yeah, I thought there was value in them at 14 or better, and you know, I thought that they would be able to do enough to keep up with LSU, but it wasn't going to matter what they did offensively, because LSU could have put up probably 100 points if they wanted to. LSU is just on fire right now. We're obviously going to talk about them coming up at the end of the pod when we preview the national title game. But Oklahoma, Tolman, I would say, and this is a good transition into my first loser, I actually think the Big 12 is a loser in this, because year to year, the committee is not supposed to consider previous years, but the committee is made up of only humans, and the human element, one of the main elements of humanity, is going to be memory. Yeah, and I think that, let's say next year, we have a coin flip decision for a spot between not even just Oklahoma, but a Big 12 team and somebody
Notre
else.
Dame.
Yeah, maybe Notre Dame or maybe like a second SEC team or Big 10 team or something like that.
Yeah.
How does the committee not? How do they take a Big 12 team? How do they take especially Oklahoma at this point? This is
I mean,
they're creating a TV show, right, Tolman? So I mean, like, you can't have the game that you had with Oklahoma again. That's just bad TV.
yeah. Well, technically, according to our rule, I think we've now got Ohio State just came off the bowl ban,
right?
And I think we're still not banned because played well enough. Notre Dame's on the bowl ban. Oklahoma's on the bowl ban, and I think the Pac-12. I think Washington's just coming off the bowl ban. Also, Sparty's definitely back, so
yeah.
them there.
Sparty back. They can make the college football playoff.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back and forth on this. So my next loser is Shea Patterson.
Ooh, yeah.
I might count I don't know what he was doing, but he had 7 egregious overthrows.
Yeah.
Michigan, they're going to have to figure something out because there seems to be nothing that they can do against better competition and elite athletes.
Yeah, I made one of my biggest bets of the year was Alabama's second half in that game. Just knowing, and the thing is, I think a lot of people, I think even some pros would think that was a little ambitious at that point because Michigan was moving the football and playing them pretty evenly. They just didn't get some touchdowns in the red zone. But I knew at halftime, I was thinking about it, and I was like, man, Harbaugh and Gaddis and Don Brown, they're really poor at making in-game adjustments against a lot better competition, especially offensive speed that they have to go up against. And obviously, Alabama's receiving corps was one of the best we've ever seen in college football as a unit. So I felt very confident that even without Tua, and when we get into the offseason pod, we're going to talk a little bit about, when we get into these teams. I think Mac Jones really performed actually pretty well in his absence. But, yeah, getting back to Michigan just being a loser, they are what they are now. To me, they're going to beat up on inferior, Big Ten competition. They're going to get their asses kicked by Ohio State, and then if they play somebody, that's equal or better competition in a bowl game, then it seems like they're going to drop that game as well. So yeah, I agree, Tolman. I'm not sure what you do right now other than just be better, recruit better, execute better, coach better. But I at this point, they are what they are, right? I mean, I don't know what they should do.
I think they are. I think they are what they are.
Right.
Unless maybe if they start winning some major recruiting battles, or I don't even know if they're recruiting the same guys that Ohio State, Alabama, and Clemson are recruiting.
Well, I've talked with Addison about this before, and Harbaugh has this thing, from what I understand, where, and this would be such a Harbaugh thing. He just doesn't recruit Ohio like his Lloyd Carr did, for example. A lot of those Lloyd Carr Michigan teams that beat Ohio State, a lot of their main players were from Ohio. And I think Harbaugh, they've had some pretty good recruiting classes, but they just are not getting it done. They just aren't performing, and maybe that is a product of maybe Harbaugh's just not as good as we all thought.
It's surprising because he strikes me as such a competitive guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got the good pedigree, so you'd think he could and should go up against the big boys for some of these big time players.
I thought when they hired him, I thought this was going to be a back and forth thing. I thought they were going to be a national player, and honestly, they're a second tier program, and I don't know if they're going to climb out of that with him or not. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So my last loser is. Sorry to Corey again, but Virginia Tech coaching staff. First of all, just Bud Foster could not stop the run, could not stop Lynn Bowden.
Yeah.
They, on offense, they kicked 3 or 4 field goals.
Yeah.
And they ended up allowing a touchdown in a 2-minute drill against a team that couldn't pass.
You're right. That's pretty horrible.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah, Corey, sorry, but that's pretty bad. And you know what? He would say, "Don't apologize. They were terrible in that spot." Yeah.
Yeah, he knows. Nick, that's it for my losers. What else you got?
Yeah. Let's see what I got here. So, losers. I have. I believe I'm pronouncing. I feel like I always butcher it. Kalani Sitake for BYU.
Yeah.
A couple of us had BYU in their bowl game against. Oh shit! I'm blanking on it now.
Hawaii.
Yeah, the Hawaii Bowl. That's right. Big bowl game for BYU as that is fertile recruiting ground. That's an old WAC rivalry. BYU should have won this football game, and this isn't just me. Like, yes, I am pissed off they didn't cover, but this guy continues to just make like the most boneheaded decisions as a head coach in game. I just they had so many opportunities where they could have just ran the ball, ran the clock out. It seems like when option A is like even just like when it's the most standard and obvious option, he just seems to choose like the wrong thing. Like he just constantly mismanages the game. And he just proved once again that BYU is always going to be capped as far as what they can accomplish because I just don't think he's the right guy for the job.
You were a winner though if you stayed up late on Christmas Eve to watch that game because that was one of the more entertaining games of bowl season.
Yeah, that's definitely for certain. It was very entertaining, and in the very end, it was just like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But next loser, I think this is a universal loser right now, possibly just loser program of the decade, possibly. Miami, the U, getting shut out by Louisiana Tech. I know that Miami didn't want to be there. That was very predictable. We talked about that on the pod. We said we all leaned Louisiana Tech. We just felt like Miami wanted nothing to do with that game.
Yeah, I took a money line.
Yeah, I mean, and Manny Diaz, I mean, it was only a year, but I think that we just saw really more of the same, right, Tolman? I mean, just a team that was not mentally tough, made a lot of mistakes. We have covered this for as long as the podcast has been up now and running and this group's been together, that Miami has got to hit on quarterback at some point in recruiting. They just have no.
You mean Tate Martell didn't do it for you?
Not quite.
He came in. He was on fire. He scrambled around for like negative 15 yards.
Yeah.
Exciting.
But if you could somehow find a prop bet on his over on snaps at quarterback, you would have won. So.
Hey, I called it before the game. Over a half on. I don't think he was going in.
You're our southern regional like inside info guy, so I knew that you somehow had inside info on this. But yeah, so Miami, big loser right now. When we get into the next year, when we get in the ACC preview, when we talk about recruiting, I'm sure we're going to be making fun of them quite a bit. Sorry if you're a fan, but to be quite frank, I don't see how you can disagree with us. They just suck ass right now. Utah, this one's pretty easy. I felt like Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, they're still beating hearts out of their chest, and they spiked it on the turf, and they pissed all over it. And I thought that Utah was just a corpse going into the Alamo Bowl. I had Texas +7, had a little bit of that allocated on the money line. And I've made fun of Texas a lot the last few years. I don't think that's like a special football team by any means, but I just knew that Utah would just be dead in that game, and they were a pretty big loser. They looked like they didn't want to be there. They just got smacked around. But that's it for my losers, Tolman. If you want to transition back to winners,
yeah. So I'll give my first winner. This is like shocking to me. I was going through all the bowl results. Okay, if you were playing pretty much at home, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Florida Atlantic rolled in the Boca Bowl.
Right.
Hawaii won in the Hawaii Bowl against BYU. We covered that. UCF in the Gasparilla Bowl, which was in Orlando.
Right.
Louisiana Tech in the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, so just about an hour west of Ruston.
Right.
Texas A&M won in Houston, an hour and a half away from here. You had Cal winning in the Red Box Bowl in the Bay Area. and then you had Texas, rolling Utah, as we just talked about, in San Antonio, an hour and a half away from Austin. The only team that lost close to home that I could find was Eastern Michigan, I guess playing close to Detroit, but I mean they played pretty well against a power conference.
Yeah, they could have won that game for sure.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. It's kind of counterintuitive because you'd think if you're playing close to home, over the holidays, too much distractions, you're like not going to care. But I guess big props to these teams for in most cases dominating in virtual home games.
Yeah, it was kind of odd in that way this year because I think it is usually the case where that like there hasn't really been like a home field advantage or anything just for the reasons the very reasons you stated. But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. I didn't know that. So that's a good point. That's props to those teams for sure.
Yeah, I love what Chris Peterson did for Washington in his last game against his old team in Boise State. That was just I think he outcoached and just they absolutely they were motivated. They absolutely outplayed Boise State. So I love that from Chris Peterson.
Yeah.
Okay, so Micah Parsons was all over the field.
For sure.
And I think that on the other side of the ball for Penn State, I think they really found something second half of the year with Journey Brown at running back, and he's announced that he's coming back.
Yeah.
They kind of had some inconsistent production from running backs earlier in the year. They're losing KJ Hamler, but I think they might have something there with Journey Brown to steady their stable of talented running backs.
Yeah, he's obviously those guys are all very talented, but they, like you said, I think they were struggling to find like the guy or a guy that could be pretty consistent, and he definitely has shown up. And Penn State, I think there's a little it seems like there's maybe some disagreement within the group about what they can be next year, but I know that they have a lot of talent that's been stockpiled by Franklin. I just it's kind of similar with Michigan. Like I just question what he can do with it as far as like I've seen what Penn State's ceiling seems to be just because I will always question that man's ability to manage a game and second halves, and I think it's got to be a little bit frustrating as a Penn State fan having as much talent as they have and feeling like you have just been a few decent coaching decisions away from possibly having elite seasons pretty much.
Yeah, so we got to give it up to Kent State for their first bowl win ever. Another unexpected fun game to watch. But they've got that guy, Dustin Crum, who was really on fire for the last part of the season. He's coming back. He could dominate the MAC next year.
Yeah, I had I guess that's a decent transition to my first one. I mean, Kent State, yeah, they won their first bowl game. And, the funny thing about Kent State is that I think the first few weeks of the year, I think most guys had them power rated as like one of the worst teams in the country. And they just, they seem to be really...
I think Steele bet BG against Kent State or something like that at one point in the year, which tells you how low we thought of them.
Yeah, and or I think I might have done that. I don't even remember.
Did,
yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, they.
One of us did.
Yeah, and but they seem to be very well coached, and they definitely improved a lot over the second half of the year. So much so that they made a bowl game and they won their first bowl game. So that was definitely one of my winners for bowl season as well.
Okay, so let's talk about some program building wins that are winners.
Yeah.
I think we have to talk about UNC, Mac Brown, and Sam Howell. Kind of that whole thing is creating a lot of hype into next year, and they absolutely dominated Temple. They looked really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. I would say right now, off the top of my head, they probably are the ACC Coastal favorite. I'm not. It's going to be interesting to see. Like, I need to see what exactly they're returning at like a couple key, within key units. I know that Howe's back, obviously, and he played extremely well for a true freshman. And it's funny because it shows you how much of a loser Willie Taggart is. Florida State had him. He was I think he was ready to sign letter of intent to Florida State, and he told them no thanks, which was a good move on his part. And Mac Brown.
No one wants to go to that dumpster fire. That
no.
maybe extinguishing.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, when we'll talk about Florida State in the offseason, but it's they're still 4 years away from beating Clemson, so at best case scenario. But I think that UNC definitely a team and possibly a program that could be slightly on the rise here. Mac is certainly recruiting some talent. I think he's doing a good job of kind of just being that CEO that he should be and letting the assistants take care of everything. And certainly a team that could make some noise within the ACC next year. I would presume that we're probably thinking Clemson's just going to steamroll everybody again, but who knows? UNC gave them a pretty good game this year, so I don't know.
Yeah, but we just haven't had a favorite in the Coastal in a long time. I feel like we finally do. We'll talk about this in the recruiting pod we'll do in the offseason, but I think Mac's a closer. And that's in recruiting, and that's showing right now.
Yeah, he just has that charm that he just I could see him easily walking into some high school rooms and getting some kids to sign right then and there. So definitely a team on the rise.
Okay, controversial one here, but I think we have to call Tennessee a winner. We thought they were dead. They came back and they won against Indiana. And say what you will about them, but I think when Brian Maurer is in the game, I think they might have something there. He gets a little more seasoning.
Yeah.
They got some things figured out defensively in the second half of the season. There's going to be a lot of hype around Tennessee next year too. Yeah,
this is one of the main programs that we have trashed, and rightfully so. A program that thinks they're a blue blood program. They just haven't been anything relevant in a really long time. But I can't agree more that I think that he needs to start at QB next year. I don't, Pruitt said they're going to have a competition. I think that's ridiculous. I mean, I get having the kids like competing is good and all that, but Maurer's definitely, I think, the better player. They improved tremendously on defense to the point where they look pretty competitive against most everybody they played towards the end. So I think a program that do we finally see them taking steps towards kind of closer to what they were when we were kids? We'll have to see next year, but there's certainly the recruiting class. Those classes that are coming in, I think it indicates that if Pruitt can just not be an idiot, I think they're possibly going to be on their way back up.
Yeah. So last one for me is just a great cap, just end to a great story, great season. But Gophers beating Auburn.
Yeah.
I think we know that they're losing a lot and they may not be back to this place next year, but the job that PJ's done, the season that they had was incredible. If they can, reload perhaps over time, they could be back there pretty soon.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition because that's my basically my last winner, and it's PJ Fleck, Minnesota. They dominated that game. PJ is kind of doing what Matt Rule did, and we saw how much money the Carolina Panthers gave Matt Rule. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens with PJ over the next 2 to 3 years. Like if he shows next year that, it's not one of those things where like he just ran into a lot of talent this past year and they don't fall off too far next year. They are bringing back some guys that they're returning some production, and I think PJ's the kind of guy that these kids are going to want to run through a brick wall for him. I'm not necessarily saying he's going to do what Matt Rule did. He's going to be an NFL coach. I think PJ fits the college game really well. He's a big-time rah-rah guy. He's younger. But I do think that it's inevitable that this guy ends up at a big-time program. And, but we'll see in the next couple of years if Minnesota is able to hang on to him. We'll see if they can remain a player in the Big Ten West. But yeah, certainly a huge win for that program. I can't remember thinking, like, I know that these bowl games that aren't the playoff games are technically exhibitions, but Auburn wanted to be there. It was a big deal to Gus that they get their 10th win. So this isn't one of those, well, Minnesota beat an SEC team in a bowl game, but that SEC team, they had playoff aspirations. They didn't want to be there. I know that's not true. I know that Auburn wanted to be there, and PJ just outcoached Gus, and Minnesota, out executed Auburn, and they totally deserved to win that game. They had a phenomenal season.
Yeah, so we love PJ, and we're definitely going to talk about Matt Rhule on this upcoming portion, talking about the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So first, let's just recap very quickly some of the more notable vacancies that have been filled. We've got Jeff Hafley going from Ohio State DB's assistant D coordinator to Boston College.
Right.
We got Eli Drinkowitz from App State after a great season to Mizzou. Sam Pittman from Georgia O-line to Arkansas. Norvell to Florida State. We've got our boy, I guess, the Grove Freshwater, Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Yeah. And Jimmy Lake at Washington. Greg Schiano's at Rutgers. So, Nick, which one makes sense? Which one do you think is good? It's going to work out.
Yeah, it's a good question. What's funny is when our boy Joey Freshwater, Lane Kiffin, was first a head coach, kind of starting out, like when he was at Tennessee, felt like that was a terrible fit. Felt like when he went to USC that actually was going to work out, and it didn't. And I don't know if it's just he wasn't quite ready to be a head coach yet. Lane, it's possible that there was some arrogance there, or maybe he just needed to learn on the job. But I think FAU
he's humbled. Yeah, you could say he's humbled now.
Yeah, and I think FAU, I think that experience did a lot for him. I think that the guy can recruit. I think he's going to make Ole Miss actually pretty competitive. I think that's actually a really good fit for both of them.
Yeah, so Lane makes a lot of sense, just his personality, the way things are.
Yeah.
Lane in my mind is kind of like the douchey dad, and Ole Miss is like the capital of producing douchey dads.
Yeah.
So it makes sense personality-wise.
Yeah.
Not sure if it's going to work out. We've really never seen it for him on big stage.
Yeah.
The one that I think is going to work out the best is I'm going to go Jimmy Lake at Washington.
Okay.
It just seemed quietly happen, but I think over the years he's run a solid defense. I think he can, keep up with what Chris Peterson has built there. I know, we don't love the Pac-12, but I think he'll be one of the better coaches in the Pac-12 immediately.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly learned from one of the best, and it seems like even when Washington has lost a lot of guys in the NFL, they seem to always play very well within his system of basically it's very bend don't break. They're always rated super high in not allowing explosives and you're right, Tolman. I think Pac-12 right now, we don't think very highly of that conference, and nor should we until we're proven otherwise. But I think that, he knows the program. He's been there. It's going to be the easiest transition of all of these. So, yeah, that one I think definitely makes sense. And I don't expect Washington to really drop off a whole lot from what they've been under Peterson.
Yeah. Okay. So which one doesn't make sense, or you don't like it, don't think it's going to work out?
Well, I mean, it's easy to pick on Rutgers, but here's the thing. When Schiano was there, they were in the Big East, and I think that the level of competition that they played against was definitely far worse. I've seen kind of stuff I don't think Rutgers fans are expecting them to, be like a 10 or 11 win team like they were when they had Ray Rice, and they were flirting with, BCS #1 status in 2007, that wild year. But Schiano, I was a little surprised at the end of his OSU tenure how stubborn he was as far as not adjusting and getting them to play a little more zone when these kids were not being properly taught how to play man to man apparently, and I felt like it was a little stale there. I just wasn't really impressed with the job he did, and now he's going back to a place that yes he's familiar with. I know he's got recruiting ties up there. I know he had success there before. I get it, but they're in the Big Ten East. I think their ceiling is pretty much like 6 wins, and I just am not sure that that's going to work out the second time around.
Yeah, I think you've got teams like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State that they've established New Jersey as fertile recruiting grounds for them.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if just Schiano we know is a great recruiter, but with the backing of this current iteration of Rutgers, I'm not sure if that can compete.
Yeah.
And now you've got a guy, another Jersey guy that was on our list. That's up to Boston College. So Hafley, he's a Jersey guy.
Right.
He's got a lot of ties there. I think he's a good recruiter. I think he's gonna
very good
win some of those battles in New Jersey too.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be tough for Schiano. Okay, so I hate recycled coaches, so I gotta go Brady Hoke.
Yeah, that's a new one. Yeah, that's a new one today. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if anything else needs to be said about that.
No, I mean. I think Brady Hoke is not a good coach, and I don't know. Yeah, there's nothing that needs to be said. You're right.
Yeah. So there was a lot written. We'll move on to predictions for couple of the notable vacancies, but there was a lot written about kind of shock at Joe Moorhead getting fired, but I think you and we've talked about we weren't really shocked with this.
No, not at all.
It didn't seem to be a good fit on either side. The offense they ran was like this horizontal offense, which just wasn't working.
Yeah.
In the SEC, they couldn't pass the ball ever.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised. So Mississippi State's got a vacancy. Rumors swirling that Mike Leach has interviewed. Nick, you got anybody you like for that job?
Honestly, it's come up so fast, and I kept hearing that Joe Judge that the New York Giants hired was their guy, and then obviously he wasn't going to take that job over the New York Giants. So I off the top of my head I can't think of anybody right now. I'm sure I probably could if I thought about it a little bit harder, but Leach, that would be interesting. Like Tolman, I was trying to think of this right before we fired up this pod. Like have we seen air raid in the SEC before? Like
I mean, Spurrier with the
fun and gun, yeah.
But kind of before air raid was really a thing. I think Spurrier had something close to it.
Yeah.
Werfel had a 40. I think Burrow just broke Werfel's touchdown record. I think Werfel was somewhere up in the 40s.
Yeah. So.
It worked.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, Pirate is. I think for all, here's the thing. We like Mike Leach. We think his personality is awesome. I think he knows his system inside and out. That his teams are always top 10. It seems like in success rate offensively. The thing is that Leach has this thing where in game, I think I don't know if he overthinks spots or if he's just so nonchalant about certain things. Sometimes there's some gaffes that are made in game where I'm kind of surprised that he, as a head coach, would have made those decisions. And then we all know that minus Alex Grinch, his defenses have always been pretty terrible. I am curious that, let's say Mississippi State does hire him. I am curious to see what his team could look like if he did have some SEC athletes on defense, and then he had some better athletes to work with offensively. I think that's a guy that I've always been curious to see what he could do with just a little bit more talent.
Yeah, and it seems like he's never really had any defensive talent. Maybe it's just because he doesn't recruit it, but also on offense, he's never had they never had a stud running back or they've always had these undersized receiver type guys, and at a place like Mississippi State, there's a lot of better athletes to be had.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Just think about it, being at Texas Tech and Washington State. Two conferences that pretty much defense is often optional, and I think at Mississippi State, even if you're getting the scraps from the South. You're getting kids that are really, really good high school football players. So, fit wise, it doesn't feel right, but Pirate, I think, can adapt to anything, and I think that would be. I think that'd be a really good hire for them, honestly, man. Like at this point, I mean, who else? Who do they get that's better than him? I mean,
I'm not sure who you get that's better. I got a couple that could make sense.
okay, yeah.
So Todd Grantham,
Yeah.
Florida DC. I think Mullen's got that staff intact, so I don't think it's going to happen. But like, he makes sense just because Grantham is like an experienced defensive coordinator in that conference.
Yeah.
And he kind of, I think he'll know what he's doing to stop some of the better offensive teams there.
Sure.
I don't know. I can see them settling for like a experienced guy to kind of steady the ship, like a Skip Holtz.
Yeah, I thought maybe Billy Napier from like Louisiana, Willie Fritz, Tulane. Those make some sense to me.
Yeah.
What about Joe Brady?
Yeah, I mean Joe Brady's going to be the guy that's going to be the hottest name in coaching in the very near future. I think I think LSU is going to do whatever they can to keep him.
He has that Lincoln Riley trajectory right now. I'm not saying
absolutely.
he is Lincoln Riley, but it's the same exact thing right now. Yeah.
If I were him, I would wait it out in a good situation because I think you can get a better job right off the bat than Mississippi State.
Oh, for sure. And I think even
like
he could even be like he might get an OC gig in the NFL. I mean that's pretty big.
I mean, yeah, he came from the NFL,
right.
So I could see it. He could also be like the next coach at Texas.
Sure.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Meteoric Rises, we got Matt Rule that basically went from Temple to Baylor to turning around an absolute shitstorm in Baylor to the NFL. Epic press conference. Love the speech they gave with the Panthers.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, do we agree that whoever turns around like Miami at some point, they're going to have whatever job they want in the NFL after 2 years? Or you got any other program that like is like shit right now that whoever takes over in a couple years, like they go to the NFL immediately?
Yeah, there's a couple I can think of, like similar programs that should be better but are kind of underachieving right now. I mean Texas, if anybody can get in there and make them a top 5-10 program consistently. USC, and I've said this on this pod this year, is as bad of a head coach as I think Clay Helton is. He did a pretty good job this year managing and getting the most out of a team that was pretty injured. I think he did a good job to understand that he needed some help offensively, and he did bring in Graham Harrell. But I still don't think he's the right guy for the job to ultimately, get USC to where they think they should be, which honestly should be dominating the Pac. That program should be wiping the floor with the Pac-12, just like Ohio State should be wiping the floor with the Big Ten. And
they should have a Clemson-like path to
yes.
the college football playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say anybody that, let's say Herman gets fired after next year, maybe that's a little tease into possibly a preview. We'll see. But I think Miami would be certainly, if somebody can go in there and bring the U back, then that's a guy that's going to get a lot of attention for sure.
Yeah. So two guys that I like for the Baylor vacancy are Willie Fritz. I know we mentioned him from Mississippi State. I just think he's a great football coach.
Yeah.
I think Josh Heupel. I think he's kind of from that area. He's a Big 12 guy.
Heupel makes a ton of sense to me. I've thought his name is the one that makes the most sense for sure.
Yeah. Anybody else for the Baylor vacancy?
I'm trying to think of guys that would fit there. I mean, honestly, man, when I've thought about it, like Heupel just sticks out to me. I thought as a joke, Kendall Briles, but I don't think that's gonna happen. You know what though? Here's the thing that's crazy, man, is that I guarantee that there's some like people with power and wealth that are Baylor boosters that wouldn't have a problem bringing Art Briles back. And please don't do that, Baylor. That would just be a horrible thing to do. He's just straight human trash. But I think Heupel is that's a very good candidate for sure.
Yeah. So last question. We talked about, Joe Brady is a guy that we recognize as like a meteoric riser.
Mm.
Nick, do you have any kind of off the radar coaches that you could see being at the helm of a bigger program in the next 3 to 5 years?
Ooh, if you have some, do you want to go first? Because I've had a couple guys I've been thinking about, but I need.
I have one that is way off the radar.
Go for it.
I'm gonna go for it. Okay. Yeah. Remember this name. You remember Clint Trickett?
Yes.
Okay. West Virginia quarterback?
Yes.
Okay. So I love this show, Last Chance U.
Yep.
Right? That show about like the junior college.
Oh, he coaches at one of them, doesn't he? Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
He coached at East Mississippi State Community College.
That's right.
I actually I watched it. He was really good with like shithead players.
Yeah.
He was really, really good. So he ended up on the staff with Lane Kiffin at Florida Atlantic, and in the last 2 years, he's gone from a like low, I think, quality control coach to quarterbacks coach. He's now the offensive coordinator at Florida Atlantic under Willie Taggart.
Interesting.
So Clint Trickett's my guy. I think he'll. I saw him in action on that show. I know it's stupid, but like I was impressed.
No, there's nothing stupid about it. I mean, if you see a guy working with these kids and he clearly has had success coaching, these guys all start somewhere low. They all start usually as grad assistants or community college, junior colleges, even high school. A lot of these guys, Gus came from high school. As big of a piece of shit as he is, Art Briles came from high school. Yeah, no, that's a really good here. I have one that I've been thinking of. This one's kind of a homer pick, but Corey Dennis was just promoted to quarterbacks coach at Ohio State, and I having more of an ear to the ground with my own program and being here in Columbus, knowing some guys that have some inside info on the program, they said that this guy is a rising star. Like he is just, he has that mind for offense, and he's very good with the quarterbacks. Interesting enough, he is Urban Meyer's son-in-law, and so I think a lot of people just assume, oh well, you think just because he's like Urban's son-in-law, he's gonna be great. Well, no, I'm not a fucking idiot. He doesn't have his blood or anything like that, but he's in a program with possibly the best developer of quarterbacks arguably in the nation right now in Ryan Day, and he's worked amongst some of the best coaching staffs that you can find in college football, and I just think that you could see him have a pretty like meteoric rise. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I hope we get to keep him for a bit, and I hope he is as good as advertised, but he's that young offensive guy that's great with quarterbacks, which is what every program seems to be looking for right now.
So pretty much you've got Lincoln Riley that's there. You've got Joe Brady that's on the meteoric rise right now.
Right.
You got my boy Clint Trickett just behind that's about to get there, and then we got Corey Dennis right after that.
Right.
Those are our next four like head coaches, offensive wizards, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is probably just part one of the coaching that we'll get into.
Yeah.
I think in the off season we're gonna kind of get into the weeds a little bit more and talk about which coordinators might make a difference as some of these coaching staffs get round out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because we'll have to talk about that when recruiting's officially over. Transfer portal is such a big thing now. It's changed college football. So we definitely have a lot more that we have to get into as far as when we start breaking down these teams for next season.
Yeah. Speaking of the breakdown, we have to do it. We will break down the national championship game for you. It's going to be played on Monday night. Clemson versus LSU. I think this is going to be a great game. Nick, do you want to pick where we start?
Sure. I'll start with when Clemson has the ball, I guess. So let's talk about the line right now. I think as of today, most books have this game as LSU -6. I think our group thinks that's clearly inflated. Now, here's the thing too, is that from just a betting angle, overall, pure generalization, just to start out. Um, as far as like my own power ratings, I have these teams pretty much as like a pick 'em. All right, so I think there's a lot of value in whoever the underdog would be in the spot, and Clemson clearly getting 6 is quite a bit for them. But LSU is they're kind of a hard team to cap right now. I think you would possibly agree with that, Tolman, just because of how hot they are. It's hard to
Yeah.
know like how good they actually are at this point. Like if I don't know if I think they're I wouldn't be surprised if they beat Clemson by, 10, 14 points or whatever if Burrow is just hot and they
I feel like it's like they're gonna beat Clemson by 17 or they're gonna lose the game.
Yeah, and so I guess I'll get into like what could happen as far as like Clemson winning this game offensively.
Yeah.
We saw it against Ohio State that Clemson has the ability to bust big explosive plays. You guys know the names like ETN, Ross, Higgins. I mean, Ross and Higgins should be healthy for this game since there was an extra week this year between the playoff games and the national title game due to scheduling conflict with the Superdome down in your old stomping grounds, T. So I don't think this is a new thing. Like I think next year the championship game should be the week after the playoffs again, but I'm not 100% on that. But those guys, Clemson got a big break this year because Ohio State beat the shit out of them physically in that game, and both teams really beat the shit out of each other. I'm not trying to make it like OSU like killed them or anything, but Clemson really could use that bye week. Essentially, is what it is. But as far as kind of X's and O's, so LSU this year, um, they definitely had some spots where they gave up a lot of big plays. And they definitely had some injuries on defense that contributed to that in the beginning to the middle of the year. Towards the last quarter of the season, they really picked it up. And they got some key guys back on defense. Grant Delpit started playing a lot better. I saw a crazy stat that he missed it was an absurd amount of tackles like the first, I think it was like 7 games he missed like 15 tackles or something ridiculous like that, and then he missed only 1 in like his last 180 snaps or something. So clearly that defense got healthier, they started playing better. The only thing is, if I'll play kind of like devil's advocate here, Tolman, is that they played Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Georgia, who none of them have good offenses. And I was really impressed with what they did against Oklahoma, but we all have said for a long time that we felt like if Jalen Hurts went against any kind of actual athletes, that we felt like he might kind of panic and crumble. And, still, Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley with time to prepare for that game. It was impressive what LSU was able to do to him defensively, but Clemson is a little bit of a different animal. Lawrence is obviously much, much better than Jalen Hurts. There's a lot that LSU has to game plan for as far as, Clemson's playmakers. Being able, they're not going to be able to key in on just one thing that Clemson does well because they do a lot of things well. But I think the key for Clemson is, I think that as long as they just stick to what they do, and it's going to sound kind of like terrible analysis, I guess, but I think if Clemson – I trust Scott. I think it's Scott Green, isn't it, or whoever's taken over?
Tony Elliott.
Who's their offensive coordinator?
Tony Elliott.
Is that who it is? The fuck? Who's Scott Green? I don't know. Anyway,
Jeff Scott was
Jeff Scott.
Assistant. He's he took a job at USF.
Yeah, that's right. So, anyways, I think that Clemson essentially is going to be able to bust a couple explosives in this game like they did against OSU, and I think that, whoever wins that battle, as far as can LSU prevent those, can Clemson bust 3 to 4 of those, that's going to go a long ways in determining, I think, who wins this game as far as when Clemson has the ball.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts about the explosives. So I do see the advantage going Clemson's way in this matchup. My favorite metric about LSU's defense is in their last 3 games, they're holding opponents to less than 20% success rate on passing downs.
Yeah, crazy.
Problem is, you've got a Clemson offensive line that's first in the country in standard down line yards. and an LSU defensive line that's only 42nd in standard amount of line yards. LSU's defense, they don't create a lot of negative plays. They're 46th in the country in like tackles for loss. So I think if Clemson stays on schedule, mix in an explosive play here and there, I think LSU is going to have a tough time stopping Clemson. When Clemson has the ball.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm gonna bring this up in future pods when we get into the offseason because I need recruiting in the transfer portal, but I've got I was going to share with you guys eventually. I've got some opponent adjusted data that I've been working on for like 2 months, and even with Clemson's shit schedule, it's still. I mean, we know just via eye test, but yeah, it checks out. I mean, this team is going to stay on schedule. They are just so balanced that it's just going to be really hard for LSU to key in on one thing. And I agree with you. I think they're going to pop a couple explosives that or could possibly be a big difference in this game.
Yeah, so I'm going to do when LSU has the ball really quick.
Okay.
And then toss it back to you. I'm not sure if I have a lot to say here. Look,
sure.
LSU's number one in everything offensively. I think we saw against Ohio State that Clemson can give up some explosives. So you can expect that to happen when LSU is on offense. They're the number one explosive team. Clemson, though, they create a lot of havoc. A lot of that havoc comes from passes defended. We saw Isaiah Simmons, their stud kind of linebacker hybrid guy. He was all over the field. And this is the first time that LSU's faced a guy like that. So, look, it's obvious that LSU on offense has all the advantages. But if you're looking to find a place where Clemson can have some success defensively, look at passes deflected, passes defensed, and Isaiah Simmons to be all over the field.
Yeah, he's a freak. I think that what I'm curious to see is that Burrow's been like metrically like one of the best ever against pressure, and we know that Brent Venables likes to bring the house, and he's going to. He's not going to not bring it. I'm sure he'll have some stuff drawn up that is going to be able to get there a couple times, but this LSU team is built to absolutely destroy blitzing defenses. The short passes, the receivers that can catch slants and take them to the house. Burrow with his accuracy, throwing with anticipation, his intelligence. I think that's going to be an issue for Clemson if Venables brings it a little bit too often, and I think that might end up happening. But I think that Clemson is going to be able to get to him at least some of the time. They got to field some of the time. They have some athletes still on the defensive line. And how you can – I think we saw with OSU like how they were able to really get Clemson is by gashing them on the ground. And, we love Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he's not J.K. Dobbins. LSU doesn't beat you explosively on the ground. They beat you through the air. So that could be something interesting to look for. But I think both offenses, to be quite frank, are going to find success. I think the total is a little high. I think it's like 69 or 69.5. That's a touch high for me. But
I can see it going that high. Honestly.
I think both teams are going to be in the 30s.
I didn't think so before, like digging into this game, but I can see this going that high because of explosives.
I do think both teams are going to be in the 30s. I don't think it gets quite to 69. Just a little teaser as far as when we get into actual predictions there. But I just think, if you guys are looking for like a main matchup, it's what LSU is able to do when Clemson's blitzing. I think especially on third downs, if they can get them off the field. But if Burrow's just continuously dicing up that blitz, it could be a long night for Clemson. But I expect Venables and Dabo to have them ready and to really hopefully contain that offense for their sake a little bit.
All right, Nick. What's your lean against the number? What are you doing betting-wise? Who's going to win the game?
I mean, definitely from a betting angle, hard lean on Clemson at 6. Probably going to have to bet them a little bit at 6. Hopefully when we get closer to kickoff, I could see this steaming to 7, and that would be pretty awesome. And the thing that's tough about it is, to be quite honest, I am rooting for Joe Burrow. I want LSU to win, but I want to win money, and I think there would be way too much value in Clemson. I also would lay money on them money line at that point because I think they absolutely can win the game. I think that LSU is. I just think everything's a little inflated. I do think they're deserving of the love they're getting, but it just seems like there's so much love. I mean, Tolman, I think like 82% of the bets are on LSU.
Yeah.
It's just too many against that good of a team in Clemson.
Yeah, I think they're too. I think they're good. I think they're in a good mindset right now. I think they're a proven team. I think there's value. Wherever the number is.
Yeah.
Six right now. I already took them at 5.5. I'm going to do money line.
Yeah.
I'm going to be rooting for LSU and Joe Burrow just because I love Joe Burrow. My ties to Louisiana, all my friends will be on that. But
for sure.
I'm going Clemson money line. I think Clemson's going to win this game.
Okay, yeah. I think one thing I want to mention too is that LSU is far superior in special teams, and if I think the game's going to be close, I think that matters a little bit. It just kind of gut feeling. It just feels like it's their year, and this is coming from an Ohio State fan that thinks that Ohio State should be in this football game. I mean, I don't know. Call it homer all you want, whoever's viewing this, but I think Ohio State's one of the two best teams in the country, and not taking anything away from Clemson, but I obviously, if I am going to bet them somewhat on the money line, I think they can definitely win the game, but that would be just from a I think value perspective there. But I think LSU is going to win this game like 34-31. It feels like their year. It's in Louisiana. The story of Coach O recruiting Burrow and how Burrow got there. It just feels like it's their time. But obviously, if I bet Clemson and bet on money line, wouldn't be shocked at all for Dabo to do what he's done in the last 5 years. To be quite frank.
Yep, LSU is definitely they win this game. It's going to be one of the better stories that we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
And as an Ohio State fan, I would love to play them in some abandoned cornfield.
Yeah, it's kind of like when.
It doesn't have to be for anything. I just want to see what happens.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Oklahoma played LSU in the BCS title game, and then USC. And there was fans after were saying that USC should play LSU because they thought USC was the best team. And it's like, I would like to see OSU play LSU, but it didn't happen. So we've got hopefully an exciting title game between LSU and Clemson on Monday night.
Yeah. So I think with that, is this going to be our last podcast talking about the 2019 season? Are we going to do any more after this?
No, I think this is it. I don't think we're going to have to recap the game or anything. I think people will get enough of that. And I think next year we started to go away from that this year. We don't need to recap the week before. If you guys are watching this podcast, then you know what happened in college football the week before.
Yeah,
I mean, like if you
either that or you like learning a different language.
Yeah, right. So I mean, like I think next year we'll keep with kind of what we're doing. Like we'll have some of the fun topics, and we're only going to preview as far as like when we get into in season next year, like the upcoming week's games. But as far as
we're only going to preview SEC and Big Ten games next year because
no, I mean, but like in all seriousness, maybe that's all we should do. But yeah, I think as far as a kind of like a loose, like a tentative schedule coming up. Tolman, I'm trying to remember, if you go ahead and just kind of give them an idea of what we're going to be looking at for the pods coming up the next month or two here.
Yeah, so we're going to turn the page to 2020. We're going to get Addison back. He's willing to join us once we flip over to 2020. We're going to be talking about recruiting. That'll be central on one podcast. We'll talk about some of our way too early predictions after recruiting. We're going to talk about spring ball and, of course, the transfer portal after some of those battles are decided. We'll do a coaching update. Talk about like which coordinators fit where. We've got a lot of fun topics like lists of what's your favorite coach that you want to go have a beer with?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Who's the last coach that you want to have a drink with? So it's a lot of fun things, talking about the news in college football. We'll have some more conspiracy corners and several half-baked ideas as well.
Yeah, certainly a lot of good stuff to look forward to. And then as we progress, post-recruiting, we'll when we get through the transfer portal, and we'll have an idea of getting closer to the summer, I guess, and maybe even like after spring ball, or might give you a teaser of that. But I'll definitely, for this upcoming season, I'm going to have opponent adjusted data to where I'll have the power ratings reset for next year. And I think the exciting part next year, Tolman, when we get into the summer, is we're going to talk about from the betting angle, which is what this pod was created for. We're going to talk about futures, win totals, maybe look ahead lines that we can grab. Like, for example, I was able to grab Ohio State plus 4.5 at Michigan this year, which is absurd. But yeah, absolute joke that they're an underdog ever. But but we'll get into like win totals and some features, like maybe if we're laying money on a team to win like a national title or a conference title. That there's you can find a lot of value in that stuff in the off season. So it's been a great year, and thanks to you guys for sticking with us and putting up with our craziness.
And we're gonna go to Apple, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Apple Podcast.
Yeah, I believe there'll be an official announcement on the YouTube channel that we'll make sure there's enough time that we'll have like a link, but we're going to transition off of YouTube and off of my ugly face on the camera, and we're going to get some better audio. We're going to actually get, I believe, on Apple, I don't know, maybe like SoundCloud or something. We don't know 100% yet, but we're going to make it to where you can access an actual podcast through your app instead of you guys having to be on YouTube. And I think that'll help grow this podcast a lot more. I think it deserves to grow. I think we have not only the kind of analysis that you would look for just from like, the stats, the nerd stuff, the betting angles, but you also get the fun stuff from us that you're quite frankly not going to get from other podcasts because they either just aren't as crazy as we are, or they've got corporations breathing down their neck saying they can't say what they want to say. So
yeah, we just want to talk about fun stuff and some dumb bets that we do.
Yeah, pretty much. So thanks for listening, and we will see you guys in the next pod.